The 12th resignation letter hit Richard Coleman's desk on a Friday afternoon, and this time he didn't even open it. He already knew what it would say: too demanding, too difficult. Nobody could work for a man who trusted no one, forgave nothing, and expected perfection from everyone but himself. Richard sat alone in his glass-walled office on the 40th floor, wheelchair angled toward the window, watching the city stretch out beneath him like a life he no longer felt part of. 3 years earlier, a car accident had taken the use of his legs, and somewhere along the way it had taken something else too: his patience, his warmth. The man his late wife used to call the gentlest soul in any room. Now he was just the CEO everyone whispered about. The one nobody could work for, the one everyone eventually left. It hadn't always been this way. Before the accident, Richard had built his company from nothing, treating every employee like family, remembering birthdays, showing up at hospital rooms when someone's child got sick. But grief and pain have a way of hollowing a person out from the inside, and somewhere between physical therapy sessions and sleepless nights, Richard had become someone he no longer recognized. He snapped at small mistakes. He questioned every piece of advice. He made people feel like they were constantly failing him, when really he was failing himself, refusing help, refusing sympathy, refusing to let anyone close enough to see how much he was struggling. If you believe people deserve second chances, even the ones who've made themselves hard to love, hit like on this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this one are just getting started. Monday morning, Human Resources sent up a temporary replacement, someone to fill the desk until they could find another applicant willing to try. His name was Marcus Bell, 34 years old, a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter alone since his wife passed 2 years ago. Marcus had worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment afloat, and this temp assignment was, frankly, just another shift to survive on. He walked into Richard's office expecting a demanding boss. What he found was a man drowning quietly behind a desk, surrounded by unopened mail and half-finished coffee, doing everything himself because he'd stopped trusting anyone to help him do anything. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't tiptoe around the wheelchair or lower his voice like the others had. He simply pulled up a chair, opened Richard's laptop, and asked what needed to get done first. When Richard snapped at him as he'd snapped at 11 people before, Marcus didn't quit. He just said, calmly, "Let me try," and kept working. Something about the steadiness in his voice made Richard pause. For the first time in longer than he could remember, someone wasn't retreating. Over the following weeks, Marcus stayed late without being asked. He learned Richard's schedule, his preferences, the small physical struggles he never mentioned, but Marcus noticed anyway. Reaching for files stacked too high, doorways that stuck, elevators that ran too slow for comfort. Marcus quietly rearranged things, never making it a spectacle, never letting Richard feel pitied. He simply made the office work for the man sitting in it. Richard noticed, though he said nothing at first. He wasn't used to someone paying attention without expecting praise or recognition in return. Slowly, the silence between them began to soften. Richard started talking, first about small things, deadlines, meetings, the weather outside his window he rarely stepped out into anymore. Then, gradually, about heavier things, about the accident, about his wife, who had died from illness just a year before the crash took his mobility too, leaving him to grieve 2 losses that the world expected him to carry alone and in silence. About how exhausting it had become to be angry at a world that no longer accommodated him, and angrier still at himself for pushing away everyone who tried to help. One evening, long after the building had emptied out, Richard finally asked Marcus why he hadn't quit like the others. Marcus told him about his daughter, about the nights he came home too tired to read her a bedtime story, about how he understood what it meant to keep showing up even when everything in you wants to give up. He said he recognized something in Richard, not a difficult boss, but a man who'd been fighting alone for far too long, mistaking isolation for strength. Richard sat with that for a long moment, then did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He apologized not just to Marcus, but for every person who'd walked out that door believing they'd failed him, when the truth was he'd never given any of them the chance Marcus had simply taken for himself. From there, everything began to shift, slowly but unmistakably. Richard started attending physical therapy again, something he'd quietly abandoned months earlier. He asked Marcus to stay on permanently, not as a temp, but as his executive partner. Someone who ran the office not out of fear, but out of genuine care for the man behind the title. Marcus's daughter started visiting after school, sitting in the corner of the office doing her homework while her father worked, and Richard found himself looking forward to her small voice asking about his day, her laughter echoing down halls that had been silent for far too long. The office that once emptied out every few weeks in a stream of resignations became, for the first time in years, a place people wanted to stay. Word spread through the company. Other employees noticed the change in Richard, the way he asked about people's families now, the way he thanked the cleaning staff by name, the way his office door, once always closed, stayed open more often than not. Nobody could quite explain it, except to say that somehow one man's quiet persistence had cracked something open that 12 resignations never could. Months later, at the company's annual gala, Richard sat proudly in front of the entire staff and told the story of the 12 people who'd left and the one who hadn't. He said Marcus taught him that leadership was never about being feared or perfectly capable. It was about being seen, truly seen, by even just one person willing to stay when it mattered most. He called Marcus not his assistant, but the reason he remembered how to hope again, the reason he remembered how to be the man his late wife once loved. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that one person's patience can change everything, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who might need these words today. It means more than you know. And before we go, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below and tell us, has someone ever shown up for you when everyone else had walked away? Your stories are what make this community so special. Richard Coleman never forgot the man who looked past the wheelchair and simply said, "Let me try." And in a quiet way, that single sentence didn't just save a job. It saved a man who had almost forgotten what it felt like to be worth staying for.